letting you know that you're welcome for who you are right now, whatever your abilities are, wherever you come from, whatever your sexual orientation or gender identity, whatever your socioeconomic status, whatever your past or present. Just know that you're welcomed, loved, and wanted here. All right, so today we're actually going to do something a little different, surprise, surprise. And for those of you who were here last week, Jon kind of started us in a conversation about faith after doubt, starting tomorrow at 6:30? At 6:30 at Panera in Palomar. This is going to be a group of Beaumont people, and all of you are invited to just have a conversation. So we're going to read a little bit of part of the book over you today in 2 sections. So this is really a time where maybe you want to journal, or maybe you want to just sit quietly, or just lay down, whatever you want to do, just to kind of reflect upon what's going to be read over you. And so I'm going to read this in 2 sections, and then Jon's going to plan to give you a few minutes to just meditate on what's going on. And then once we're done, we're just going to ask for what stood out to you. So since leaving the pastorate almost 15 years ago, I've continued to make a living in the faith world as an author and speaker. So in a sense, I am still under the pressure of practical demands and expectations, but interestingly, especially as I near the age of retirement, the practical concerns fade. If I wanted to leave the faith now, if I wanted to come out as an agnostic or atheist, or as a spiritual but not religious, or whatever, as a 60-something adult, I could do it more easily than ever. But interesting, the more free I feel to not identify myself as a person of faith, the more free I feel to do so, in ways that feel honest and authentic, of course. Something in us wants to belong, but something in us also wants to be free, to be authentic, to be the truest, most genuine version of ourselves that we can. These 2 desires can be in tension. Something in us wants to be honest, but something in us also wants to be liked by those around us, and those 2 desires can be in tension. Something in us wants to be good, but something in us also wants to be thought of as good by others, and these 2 desires are often in tension. Something in us wants to be consistent, but something in us also wants to keep growing. And growing often means changing. So those two desires often conflict. When enough conflicting desires wrestle within us, the faith crisis becomes an identity crisis. With so much to lose, we face the temptation to trade away our integrity and honesty for the security of belonging. If we do, our good faith decomposes into bad faith, and we become stagnant and divided persons wearing masks and hiding secrets. Thank you all so much. So did anything in either of those two passages we read kind of stand out to you, maybe create a conversation starter in your head, anything that anyone would like to share? Andrew has a mic to pass around so that the people on Zoom can hear us. And no pressure on this. If no one has anything, that's totally fine.
I can say something.
Oh,
just generally, I think I really resonated with the tension of when a lot of things in your mind and in your, theological path change and start to look nothing like they used to. It's been tempting for me to just want to throw everything out at times, whether or not that's a rational thought, but it's been easier mentally to just sometimes think I'm done with all of it, just don't care, don't want anything to do with any of it. But there is this draw toward spirituality and connectedness, and even the person of Jesus at times that has kept me, I guess, in that tension of wanting something, but not being quite sure what that something is, and not really being able to identify it even to myself. And so I think that tension is kind of right where I am most of the time these days. And for better or for worse, I don't really feel the need to resolve that tension right now. It kind of feels okay just to be there, I guess.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of what you talked about last week, where you have more questions than answers, but you're in.
Yeah.
Despite it. Like, it's that concept of, if we probably went around and asked each person's definition of Jesus, I bet we would laugh at how different it is, because we're all in different places. Like, we're all humans, we're of different ages, we're in different places in our lives, and what we need faith for is different. So I just don't think it would be consistent in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's the beauty of tension, is we can learn from each other where we're at.
Anybody else have something they wanted to share from that?
Being myself always wins.
Oh, that was pretty short. I just said, being myself tends to always win. I'm going to say what I think, and other people are going to accept me, or they're just not.
Have you not been accepted at times?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it definitely comes with that risk, and I'd rather know up front that someone's not going to accept me than to be pretending.
I feel like I've had to, well, I don't know if I've had to, but I have pretended a lot in my life to make sure that I was still accepted. And there are right times to pretend.
Right.
There are, for example, one is safety.
Right.
So, we say, if you are gay or trans or something that your parents or others would not accept in you, it's not incumbent on you. It's not your responsibility to tell truth even to those people if it makes you unsafe.
Yeah, I won't tell my work,
Yeah.
my sexuality, because there are laws that can discriminate, and I can be discriminated against. They say they won't, right? They may even have it written in there that they're not going to, but they can, because there's nothing on a federal level that can stop them, or state
That's
level.
right. That's absolutely true. And, go ahead.
There are definitely times where I should have and didn't.
Well said.
Yeah, that's right. And so, any kind of coming out is your story to tell. And you're not responsible to share it any time before you're ready to. Or if you're ready to. That's a right that you get to have. Even if it means not telling the truth. I think that was an older understanding, but still, I'm sure really prevalent, that you have to always tell the truth.
Yeah.
and there are probably a lot of times when it's okay to not tell the truth.
Yeah, you actually helped me with this in college. Whenever most people would look at you and they would ask you how you're doing, you defaulted to, oh, I'm good. Because in most ways of my life, I am good, but I'm not going to tell them about the areas that are not. That's the perfect, pivot.
It is. That's great. Yeah. And just in case you wondered, I usually am actually really doing well. But having said that, even if I weren't, I feel very comfortable saying I'm doing great. Because I get to pick the people who are going to be with me in heart. And it may not be the person asking me that.
Right.
I may not be ready to make myself vulnerable to that person, and then that's okay. So, thanks, Chris. I was just going down that road a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then you could have a T-shirt. There would even be people that would have T-shirts that would say, I don't know, eat dirt or something like that. That would be saying, I'm going to say what I want to say, and I hope you're okay with it.
Be yourself, they'll adjust.
And yeah, be yourself, they'll adjust. And I think that's powerful too. Okay, anybody else before I go on? Today we're talking about, or the next 4 weeks, in fact, we'll be talking about this book and some things that Brian talks about in it. And the 4 sort of weeks that we're doing right now he talks about 4 stages of, in essence, of spiritual development. So many of you would know like Piaget or some of the other stage theorists who would talk about stages, or the triangle where self-actualization is at the top, survival is at the bottom, that kind of idea. Well, in spiritual terms, we can talk about it in a lot of ways. I will say that in general, my experience with Gen Z and millennials is they do not like categories. That's not one of their favorite things. And so there's sort of a question of, is there value in talking about these as categories? And so I'll tell you the first one and see if this helps. In these 4 stages that he talks about, this first one is called stage 1. I bet you didn't see that coming. And this is an idea of simplicity. We've talked about this many times in terms of binary thinking. I'll just tell you one example. So I was getting my doctorate. That's how late in my life this was. I was in my early 30s. And I remember talking to one of my professors. And I don't think I've ever told this story. And I was talking with him. I distinctly remember a wonderful man, Ron Penn. Anybody that is in that world. And he was trying to sort of help me be more nuanced. And I was in a very black and white time, as I had been up to that point in my life. And so he was saying, well, but what if, and giving me hypotheticals that would sort of lead me towards realizing that this was a nuanced situation. And eventually I just said, you tell me the specifics of the example, and I will tell you what the right thing to do is and the wrong thing. So that was, that was near the end of my doctoral work. Wow. And then I was still very much thinking in binary terms, that there is a right and a wrong, there is a good and a bad, there is even a best and a worst way of doing things. Everything is in this binary. So that would be this stage 1 idea, and what we're mainly going to talk about today. I will tell you up front what the other stages are, just so that you have a sense of where we were going. If stage 1 was that simplicity stage, stage 2 is complexity. And I think a lot of my life today is lived in complexity. That's the way I think in a lot of ways. Stage 3 is perplexity, and stage 4 is harmony. And he talks about these stages as like the rings in the trunk of a tree, where we have this one, and then we grow, and then we have this one, and then this one, so that the next stage encompasses the earlier stages, but also transcends the earlier stages. And so actually the first place that I think we'll go today is, Logan, I'm interested, I have some hesitancy with going down the stage theories. Any dangers you see in it?
The immediate thing that comes to my mind is it's not going to help everyone. And we just have to know that up front. So some of you sitting in here, this could be very helpful, and others, it won't help at all. It's just not the headspace that they are in. And, it could be the Gen Z millennial thing, but it could be anyone. Anytime you start breaking things down piece by piece, it's kind of like when you're reading sections of a book, you don't love every section of a book. When you say you love a book, most of the time you're talking about the final act, or you're not really talking about the beginning or the mid. Your opinion is almost dictated by the whole picture, not piece by piece.
Yeah, we could talk about the 4 stages in simplistic terms. And that would be ironic, right? if we were saying, you know, good and bad and all of those kinds of things for the other stages, that would be a little bit fun.
The other hard part too is like, most of us here don't embrace simplicity, so part of it is triggering of what we're talking about. Most of us right now are already in more of a complexity mindset than a simplicity mindset because of the trauma of our background and our families and fill in the blank.
You know, one of the things Brian talks about is when he and I were growing up, he and I are about the same age. When we were growing up, virtually everybody was in the simplicity stage up through, you know, middle school or high school. Today, that's not true anymore. Today, you that are younger here have grown up most of your life in a complexity.
Right.
To begin with. Now, if you grew up in a more fundamentalist home,
Right.
a more conservative home, you might have very much grown up in a simplistic view of things. And I think it's safe to say that most conservatives would be in that kind of.
They at least want to be. They would deny the tension that's going on, because that's what I was reading of, like, I would say I grew up in a simplistic home, but I would say that I always felt the tension of the complexity while I was in it. Now, how I acted in my behavior around it was altogether different, but I grew up with tension.
So, I think for me, I understood things, and I think you're right, I would have said that the simplistic level, that first level, is the best place to be. It's the right place to be. So we can give some theological examples, right? Maybe you've heard these. Every word in the Bible, this isn't the Bible, sorry. Every word in the Bible, every word in the Bible, this, not because this is a Bible, but it contains the Bible, somewhere, is true, right? It is all inspired by God, infallible and inerrant in its original writing. Okay. So, in fact, the argument given by conservatives is, if you don't accept that, it's a slippery slope. Right? If you don't accept that every word is actually right, then what's to keep you from questioning the whole thing? So it turns out they're right. I know you'd hate to sort of give that to them, but it's true, right? We do question everything. And in fact, we're supposed to question everything, and part of that is this idea of doubt as a doorway.
Right. But at the same time, that happens, let's remove ourselves from spirituality altogether. If you think about a marriage, people are questioning their marriage all the time. They have questions about it all the time. Friendships. How many of us have the same friends now that we had growing up? All of them. I don't have any. And that's not a bad thing. It's not that those people are bad people. We grew apart organically. I don't even live in the same state I grew up in, so I have no proximity to them.
Can you imagine coming into college and dating somebody as a freshman and having grown up in a simplistic household, for example, and marrying them after your sophomore year, and then what happens when you both change?
Right.
And so that didn't used to be a thing, right? Because people stayed the same. In fact, you may have heard this. Well, you knew what I was like when I married you. Like, I am, or you, this, so, I guess Matthew and Ralph, you would have heard this a lot, like, they're a rock, they never change, meaning a good thing. Now, I don't think most of you would ever think of that as a good thing.
Yeah.
We want to be people that are changing.
Right.
So what do you do when you marry young and you change, both of you, or one changes and the other one doesn't?
It's complicated.
So, stage 2. It's complicated. Yeah, that's exactly right.
The biggest con of a simplicity mindset is you lose the ability to be curious. I'll give you an example. I came into college thinking I knew what I wanted to do. I really did. Well, I ended up changing my major. No one would have told me that when I did it. And then I got into professional career. And all of a sudden I found out all these other things I'm actually really good at, and I had no idea from college. Shocker. So I would have never gone down this path, though, had I not been curious enough to try things. And I think the biggest con of a simplistic mindset is you lose a lot, not wholly, but you lose a lot of ability to be curious about things. You don't get permission to question things. You have to just be in agreement with what you've been told. The best thing my parents did for me was they gave me the ability to think freely. But the caveat was, if I was going to disagree with them on something, I had to bring it to the table. Like, you can't just spout out nonsense. You have to have done it. You have to have felt this through, and you have to be able to quote some things. And it made for some very interesting conversations in my house, too, to put it mildly. For the record, my parents and I don't agree on anything, and we still love each other. So isn't that crazy?
Yeah, so is that a possibility for marriage for you? To be married to someone that you love very much, but the amount that you agree on is very small?
I don't know. I don't know the answers to that.
Anybody got something?
Define small.
So, are there certain things that are essential for you to agree on? And what was it?
Gay rights. Gay rights.
Gay rights. Yeah, right. So if you marry somebody that feels differently about gay rights, well, it's not going to make any sense.
Right.
I mean, that's probably, depending on who you are, that could be the whole ball of wax as far as what is so important.
I do think there's the ability to be at different places on it, though.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think people are in different places a lot, even concerning like a gay rights conversation, because a lot of people are pro-gay people, but they may not be pro-gay marriage. And then so it gets messy, unfortunately. For us, it's like, what? That my brain does not compute. But for other people, that is their worldview.
Yeah, which is craziness, right? I mean, to our minds, that's just,
It's insane.
it's insane. And yet that may be in the spectrum of things, that may be sort of in the middle.
Right.
Because the other one is being gay is bad.
Right. And that's, man, that one's hard.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of it, and I hate bringing this up, and we have to be very careful how we touch it, is a lot of it depends on the politics too.
Tell me what you mean.
So, and this again alludes to what you talked about last week, pre-2015, the conversation was different around certain subjects. So a lot of it depends on where the politics are. You know, there was a period of time in between World War II and Vietnam that we thought war was profitable. Well, now we've had like 4 in a row that are not. So the national political stage has completely changed on the war conversation. Gay rights completely changed in 2015, and in my view, didn't even go far enough. We just allowed people to get married. We didn't protect them in the same way that we protected other people. So even that has complexity to it. So a lot of it depends on what is going on nationally as well, as much as I would rather ignore that.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. We're more divided now than we've been since the time of the Civil War, politically.
Right.
And so if you're dating somebody that is on the other side of that political issue, that's going to be...
It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember a time when, I remember as a millennial time when politics just wasn't talked about. You just didn't talk about it, you just voted. And no one really asked you.
It's so weird.
It's weird.
Yeah, it is.
But that was my reality. Like when I first voted, like, you know, my family handed me, here's your ballot, don't tell us anything about it, fill it out, it's great, turn it in. And that was the end of it. My first 2 elections were like that.
You know, I mean, there was a divide early, but it wasn't nearly the chasm that it is today between the two. There was a lot in the middle. And by the way, this is statistically true too. I've seen graphs of the dots of where people are, and now all of the dots are in 2 very different places, and they used to be like this. You know, it used to be lots of purple, and now there's very little purple.
Yeah, and I guess my point in bringing that up is like, we've always been more okay with dots and being in slightly different places and in slightly nuanced places in politics than we ever have in faith.
Yes.
All of a sudden with faith, it's like, you have to think the right way. And it depended on what you were aligned with. So you were part of a fundamentalist church, you had to think like a fundamentalist. No question asked, you had to sign the form and you had to follow it to the letter. Otherwise you're done. You're not part of us. You are a sinner, probably damned for hell. Like that's probably their philosophy of it.
That's like it was in the 70s and 80s. They always preached hell and damnation,
Right.
but then around 1990s, it changed. We started talking about God's love. Jesus is love. So that even changed radically because nobody was ready for it. It was like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you talking about? But see, now it's kind of all shifted back over to the side where it's to preach love. Not hell and damnation, but love. Because that's the 2 greatest commandments Jesus gave us.
Right, so Matthew was saying in the 70s and 80s there was a lot of hell and damnation talk. And then in the 90s it shifted towards this idea of love. And even in evangelical churches that was very true. Especially at evangelical churches that is very true. And that there was that shift. There's still, I find there's still just as big a divide. It's how much it's talked about. Is changed. Like you rarely see an evangelical church that talks about that's hell and damnation things. But the underlying assumption of everything they teach is hell and damnation.
Right. If you don't follow these things, you sign.
Southern Baptist Convention.
Right.
That's one of the best examples right there. I mean, they come up with stupid stuff all the time
Yeah.
that they want to vote against.
We were even talking about that. Different for, you know, my perspective prior to coming here was the way Presbyterians think, the church we use, and I didn't even know it was Presbyterian. So I thought it was all the ones who wouldn't, like, you know, the ones that if you have a doctorate and you're a woman, you still can't teach, which just blows my mind. But that's not this at all. So even within that, there's so much nuance and it's hard to know.
Yeah, and so in case that isn't clear to anybody out there or here, in Presbyterianism, there are many branches, but there are 2 big branches, the 2 most populous ones. We're the biggest one, which is Presbyterian USA. This is a mainline denomination that's very progressive. As a church, we would say that it's a good thing to marry gay people. And all of the things that that, are usually associated with that kind of progressive. The other one is Presbyterian Church of America, PCA, and that's a very conservative denomination. So whenever you think of conservative evangelicalism, that would be the PCA. And so it's confusing, because we don't have out here Presbyterian USA.
Right.
We have Presbyterian. And there's another church in town that's PCA, and they don't have PCA, it's Presbyterian. So what's the normal person to do? I mean, how are you to know which one it is? And the answer is you have to look it up online and find out.
Right. To the simplicity, it's just not simple.
Yes.
It's not. So it's funny, people want to make faith simple, but you can't even create a structuring that's simple.
No.
Or that's clear.
No.
It's not clear. Like that's a perfect example of what's not clear. We have no idea.
You have to do your homework.
You do. Yeah, because you may step into something that is actually on the opposite of what you might believe, what you think is a good thing. You may step not in a love place, but in a rules place. I want to go back to the main discussion and setting. So, if there are these 4 stages, for me, what I feel like I learned by learning about the stages, and this is just an example. This isn't the right way. Part of the point of it is that it's nuanced and complex. It's not just simple. And so McLaren would absolutely talk, and in fact he explicitly talks in these ways. This is not you're here or you're here or you're here or you're here, and I'm here and sucks to be you. That's not what this is. It's very nuanced, and it's I have elements of all 4 of these. And all of us do. It's how do we move into maturity? How do we move more into maturity for where we are? And so I'm using the stages to help me know, to give me like a vision of, oh, I could actually go there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he talks about each of these stages, that the doorway to get from the one to the next is doubt.
Mm-hmm.
That without doubt, you don't change. Why would you change? You already have all the answers, even whichever stage it is. But doubt is the doorway that lets us go to the next, more mature, perhaps, stage in whatever area you might be thinking about. So the question is, one of the questions is, well, what is your favorite part about doubt?
My favorite part about doubt is honestly that I don't have to think a certain way. All options are on the table, even about God.
Yeah, right.
And it just creates in me a capacity for curiosity, and because I hold the belief that we are hardwired for connection, and that I truly believe that love, which is such a limiting word, is the best thing for us in life, and that maybe this gives permission for us to think about God differently. Maybe God's love embraces more people than what we want to think about. Not even just in queer communities, but maybe people who don't call him Jesus. What a radical thought.
Yeah.
What if he's actually better and can encompass more? What if I can feel agnostic about some things and that he delights in me for thinking agnostically? That's the best part about doubt for me.
Oh man, I love that.
Oh, Maddie's.
So, while I was at Asbury last year, I found myself having a conversation with I don't remember what like the actual title is, but the person that's over chapel at Asbury, and I was having a conversation with her.
The chapel czar.
Sure, that works. Basically.
It's not true.
So I was having a conversation with her, and she was kind of asking me, because I had just come out as queer to her, and she made it into a bigger deal than it really was to me at the time. And she was like, well, how can we be inclusive of like queer students and like their faith needs and everything? And I was like, well, a lot of us just have come to a point where we are questioning everything that we ever knew. And we don't have a lot of support in that, especially here. So what if you were able to bring in, people from all different walks of faith, and even like different faith denominations, like what if you were able to bring in a Catholic speaker one time, or even like a Muslim speaker, and she was kind of just like, whoa, no, hang on. We might be able to swing a Catholic speaker, but I can't see a future in which we could ever have anyone from a denomination or a religion, that is not Christian explicitly. And it was just, I think that was kind of the moment where I realized unless something very, very drastic changes, like institutions within that mindset will never have the opportunity to kind of grow in the compassion and the acceptance and welcoming of other thought processes, faith journeys, than kind of what feels safe for them. And in that way, they kind of like being closed-minded like that and closed off like that to other faith journeys, other journeys of thought. They're closing themselves off to offering any support to anyone that might not feel like they fit in with the exact cookie-cutter, shape that they offer. It was just such an interesting conversation, and it was like, there was this tension, because like you could feel the sincerity oozing from her, dripping from her. Fake sincerity, maybe?
No, I think it's legit. I think she's totally legit.
Yeah, something like that. But it was just like, you're so close, but you were also so far, and you'll never get there if you just keep continuing.
Yeah, she's beholden to a group of people who won't ask the question.
Because she has to be right in her thinking. It always circles back to that.
Yeah, that's right.
The value set where I see, like, here's the truth. There is no faith without doctrine. It doesn't exist. Like, because they're part of real faith, because it destroys certitude, which is what evangelicalism practices, is they want you to be certain about what you're thinking. They want you to be certain about what heaven looks like. And crazy stuff that I stop myself, that we can't know that. There's no way.
Yeah.
Even what you talked about with Hagar, like, we look at it as a picture. We have to see things through pictures. Well, there's tons of doubt in those pictures.
Right.
Because a story can be interpreted, and it has been interpreted so differently.
Yes.
And that's why there is no faith if you don't have any doubt in there. So, yes, I guess I'm encouraging some level of agnosticism in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so, I recently, I can't remember if it was last week or when, but I'm a Jesus person. Like, I cast my lot all in with Jesus. I think Jesus was God. And as such, he's a picture. We can learn what God is like because we can look at Jesus. And Jesus said in 2 places, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. And to limit Jesus limit the Holy Spirit to only talking to one ethnic group, I just think that's crazy. Or even one cultural group. The Holy Spirit isn't bound by where the church has gone. The Holy Spirit is above all of that. The Holy Spirit can move into every culture. And that's why, Maddie, we would want to learn from a progressive Muslim, progressive Buddhist, why we want to learn from people that are out of very different cultural backgrounds. Because the Holy Spirit has invested herself in people of other cultures.
It's crazy, right?
It's crazy. So here's the tension. You could be a total Jesus people, all in, and want to hear what the Holy Spirit has taught somebody else.
Right.
Outside of your cultural setting.
Correct.
That should be obvious to us.
Right.
And yet, that's not a place that somebody that is in the binary understanding could go. If it's not Christian, it has to be bad. That's the binary way.
I mean, it's where McLaren had to go.
And absolutely.
You know, he had to go on the same exact thing we're talking about himself to find what faith means to him and how he defines it. And he did that later in life.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
Not as late as me, but later for him for sure. I was reading him in the mid-2000s. And by then he was well on his way, though not nearly as far as he is today.
Right.
He's grown so much since then. And he would say that too.
Yeah. And I just love Maddie's point because what I love, and it's really seeing sacred in everything, right? Like that's what changed my life is,
Right.
you know, two Harvard people who don't fit in anywhere, seeing God, however you define her, in all things, means that we have an open opportunity. And why would I be so narcissistic to say that someone that doesn't call it Jesus can't be with him? Like that's insanity. That we're just missing the point.
How about Christian narcissism? What do you think?
It's real.
I haven't heard that term, but I think that's what it is.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Christian arrogance and Christian narcissism.
Real faith means that you all has doubt in it, and it also means that there's a limitless nature to it. Like if you truly believe there's a God, a higher power that's above us, why would that power limit itself? Like that's insanity.
Yes, it is.
Like, just as a broad concept to prove a point of like, I've never liked that. Because everyone always talks about how powerful God is, but then you gotta think this way. I'm like, that's so limiting.
So I don't know if this is a true story or not. This could totally be apocryphal, I don't know. It's probably a preacher story that I heard somewhere, but I like it well enough that I'm gonna say it. So as the story goes, Picasso was doing a portrait of this man's wife. And so he had paid Picasso to paint this portrait of his wife. And this was in his Cubist stage. And as you might guess, this picture looks very different in this way from the way she looks in as a photograph. And so the husband sees it, and he's like, "What? This is horrible. She doesn't look like that at all." And Picasso says, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, this isn't what she looks like." And he says, "Well, what does she look like?" And the guy has, a little picture. This is what my wife looks like. Picasso says, "Mighty small, isn't she?" And just, that notion of what something looks like may not be a great representation of what it is.
Right. I have actually a question for you.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Do you see any value in simplicity as
Yes.
a concept?
Yes. First, I think it's really valuable as we're raising children, for there to be some kind of simplistic base. So I know with Michelle, and very young, was trying to understand who the good people were and who the bad people were. And so she was always looking intently, as you can imagine Michelle doing, is this a good person or a bad person? Because it was simplistic, it had to be one or the other. And she figured it out. People that had this little stick in their mouth were the bad people. And anybody that didn't have the stick in their mouth, those were the good people.
Like a literal stick.
Like a white stick.
Like a cigarette.
Like exactly like a cigarette. So if you smoked, you were a bad person. If you didn't, you were good people.
So I have to say that's not far from like the learned practice.
Give that a mic.
Oh, that's not.
Honestly, I just have to say that's not far from what I was taught by others growing up. Not even like my own reasoning, just for simplicity's sake.
Yeah, that's right. And so, what we want to do is we want to say everything is not equal.
Right.
And that first stage is good and bad. So if you want to get something, crying and hitting your sister is not the good way to get that. Bad, don't do that.
Thank you for teaching her that.
Yes, we tried to teach her that, only with so much success. And loving people and sharing, like this is a first grade rule, right, or kindergarten rule, sharing good, not sharing bad. And so we do have those kind of simplistic things. We tried to introduce very early on nuance. And so I don't know, Kristen, you can speak to that better, but I feel like you had a pretty nuanced sense as opposed to a binary sense pretty early on.
I definitely did, and I remember my friends having a very binary sense all the time. I'm like, really? Like, you think it's that simple? And then also, because I was so math-brained, and because Mom saw that, she taught me very young probabilities, and seeing the world not just through like this black and white, but a very nuanced sense with numbers and with math. And I've always sort of held onto that, and the world is just probabilities. That's what the world's made of.
A lot of people think of math as simplistic in terms of it's right or wrong, this is the way you do it or not the way you do it. And that's actually not true at all about math. Math is very nuanced and complex, and there are all kinds of beauty even in it, in the way you go down ways. So it's an extremely nuanced field. So the more you know about math, the quicker you will leave simplicity in, actually.
Especially when you get to abstract algebra, and they're like, 2 + 2 is 1 now.
Yeah, I also thought about simplicity in the way of there are times when you're in trauma or some sort of mental health crisis where you just can't hold more.
Yeah, right.
And so you need that simplicity to get through whatever emotional trauma, baggage, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, with the help of a professional to kind of guide you through it, to help you on the way to a deeper thinking. It's not always natural. Like from a good example of mine was after what happened to me, I had to blow up my faith. It had to all go.
Yeah, right.
And then I had to, I didn't even think it was reconstruction. I had to totally just be open to explore all options post letting it all go for the sake of my sanity and not emotionally collapsing.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. And, with complexity and nuance, I think if you don't have some simplistic middle part of the tree, then the complexity doesn't matter.
Right.
Because now you're not if you don't have that middle part of the tree, then everything is equal. And that's not reality. We think that the way of love is better than the way of hate. Now, how that looks is nuanced, complex, but that is a binary truth. And unless you have that middle part of the tree of simplicity, then the next part doesn't help you any. It doesn't get you anywhere.
Right, same with people doing the best they can. It's the same thing. Like, there's nuance in that for sure.
Right.
But it's easier to do the other.
But people are usually doing the best that they can do.
Or the tragic truth is, the best people can do requires them to not be around other people.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
It means some people can't fly planes. That's what it means.
What does that mean with flying on planes?
Well, we have a no-fly list for a reason. We need people who are not safe.
That's exactly
Fly. So, the best they can is not getting on a plane.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You are not getting on a plane.
That's right. And so we are not going to allow unsafe people
Right.
with our children.
Right.
That's just, yeah, and I think there's enough nuance in that. All right. That is our first sort of step is into this idea of simplicity. And next week we'll move into what complexity and nuance looks like. And for us to know that that's only stage 2.
Yeah.
So
What does harmony mean?
yeah. I tell you what, there's one of the people that we really like is a guy named Richard Rohr, and he has this book called The Universal Christ. Whenever I'm reading it, it's like, what the hell is he talking about?
I know. I think I was in the same
I have
thing.
no idea what he's saying.
I tried so hard.
And so these people they're wonderful people that are going to help us learn how to go deeper and be more mature. We know that one of the good ways is to share love with each other. We're just saying that's good. Now what that looks like depends. But one of the ways we share love with each other is by taking communion every week. And so even now, you can go back and get some kind of cracker and some kind of juice. And then we'll come back here and we'll take this together. Or you can take it on the way either way. Speaking of categories, this would be an interesting one. So who are the goldfish people and who are the cracker people?
Goldfish.
We take this because we love each other. This is a symbol of the author of love, our God and Jesus. So when we take it as a way of saying, we love each other. For a couple thousand years, communion has mainly been used to exclude people. Who was allowed to take communion? I don't know if you heard this going on in your church.
The people who were baptized.
So people who were baptized could take it. In the early church, you had to go through a year of the catechumen, of study, before you could be baptized and then take communion. In any case, in churches too, there are churches many churches where you cannot go and take communion there. It's been used as this symbol of exclusion. But what if Jesus meant his blood to be shed for all? What it's actually a symbol of inclusion. Remember that sticker? I don't know, some of you might have seen it at a Pride Day. And it's the flag and it's Jesus holding pride flag and
The trans flag.
trans flag, and he's saying something like, when I said everyone, I meant actually everyone.
Love that sticker.
The idea of this being the juice of inclusion. And so we take it in that way, that we love each other, include each other. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me, sharing that with each other. Renee, I'm just so happy to have you back. And, you know, we've been praying for you. We love you. We are so much better because you're here. Because you are actually here, you and your children. Because you're here, we're better. We're more like Christ because you're here. And I'm so grateful for you that I'm really happy to say out loud that you just bring so much to our little community here. And so thank you for it. And we grieve with you. And you don't have to get over your grief in the next 2 weeks. You can take as long as you need to grieve. Take whatever time you need and we'll do it with you. We just want you to know that. The rest of you may be in hard things or in easy things, whatever kind of thing you're in. Here's what we believe. Our God sees you. Our God hears you. Our God loves you. Whatever you find yourself. Thank you for joining us today. We love you all. I wonder if there are announcements. I feel like there are.
Do you want to discuss more about what the book study is going to entail? Like, should people be prepared for anything?
Yeah, great. I don't know.
Okay.
So the book study starts tomorrow night, 6:30 at Panera, and it's this book. And so what we'll do is we'll do a certain number of chapters this first time tomorrow night. Ideally, people would have read, I don't know how many chapters there are, but we're doing, I think, 6 weeks on it. So if everybody were to read basically 3 chapters, 2 or 3 chapters, they're pretty short, the chapters are. If you were to read 2 or 3 chapters a week, you would be able to keep right up. And this is going to be a lot of discussion oriented. I'm not going to be preaching about it. I'm going to give a little bit of overview in case people haven't read it, so that they have the context. But then I'm basically going to be asking questions. And we'll go down those questions. So even if you haven't read it, please come anyway. And, I think it'll still be a really fruitful discussion. That was such a good question. Thank you, man. A couple things with Beaumont. One is on July 30th, they're having a back-to-school bash. What that means is they'll be giving out bags of school supplies. What was it?
Backpacks.
So, not backpacks, but plastic, big Ziploc bags. You can make it into a backpack if you want. And we would love if we could get 2 or 3 woven people to help us. It'll be basically between 12 and 1:30 when they'll bring all the supplies, but we need help getting them from the car into here, and then we'll be, in the hour and a half, we'll be splitting up all these supplies and putting them in these bags, so that when the torrent of kids comes at 1:30, we'll be able to give these bags to these kids. And also we want to be able to just love on the people as they come. So for you to know, that's 3 weeks from today, we'll be doing that back to school bash. Then on August 20th is Rally Day, and that'll be another combined service in Pride Hall. And we'll be doing a service together. All right. Any other announcements? Yes. T, you got one?
What?
Yes, you do. Can you give a mic to T? Or she
Yeah,
can.
whatever.
I am not too sure about this, but I believe the dinner that we postponed it like a week ago too, I think. Apparently, with the information that I know, we're having it July 22, is it? If you guys have no plans, and that's going to be at 6, I believe.
July, is that a,
It's on a Friday.
Saturday.
yeah, it's Saturday. So, okay, Saturday the 22nd, that's our new date?
I guess so, yeah.
That sounds great to me. July 22nd. You said 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Or is it 5?
I guess 5 now.
Okay, 5 o'clock on July 22nd, on Saturday. That'll be really great. We are going to get to have some honest-to-goodness Navajo food, and even learn, I think, at least somewhat, how to make Navajo bread.
Yeah, if you guys
Make
want.
your own bread.
I guess you make your own
Make our own bread.
I
I love everything about that. And
BYOB, bring your own bread.
And by the way, if you just stop by my office on the way out, Renee brought back for me this beautiful loom, like a little, I don't know, a model of a loom with a Navajo lady weaving on it. That is to say, woven. And so it's just beautiful. So you can stop by there and see that. Very good.
Also, I think the dinner's combined with the birthday.
For whom?
Zachariah.
Oh, great.
Not-
Raya?
Yeah.
Wave your hand. And if you don't know Raya and the other ones, this would be a great chance because they're wonderful kids that I love, and you will love too when you know them. Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. We love you much. See you next week.